So let's go. Good morning everyone, and welcome to the 4th edition of the Energy and Resources Forum. It is an honor to stand before you as we gather to address today's topic, today's fil rouge, the elephant in the system, moving the immovable. On behalf of the Zero Emission Group Association and the entire organizing committee, we extend our warmest welcome to all of you who share our commitment to shaping a more sustainable future. Now, before we begin, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to those who made this event possible, our sponsors, EPFL's Distributed Electrical Systems Laboratory, the EPFL Durabilité Center, and the SG Poly, whose support is invaluable in driving these critical conversations forward. Our distinguished speakers, who bring diverse expertise and perspectives to tackle the urgent challenges of climate change and the energy transition. Our moderator, Karin Frey, partner at Beratung, owner of Common Ground Communications and host of the Energy Voices podcast. Her experience and insight will guide today's discussions. Karin, we are pleased to have you on board with us once again this year. Thank you. Of course, we are grateful to you, the audience, who showed up this morning, and hope you will come more numerous in the afternoon and during the day. Your presence and participation are what makes this forum a collaborative space for innovation, critical thinking, and action. And last but not least, a huge thank you to the incredible organizing team behind EUREF. These passionate students have worked tirelessly behind the scenes for months, crafting the program, coordinating with the speakers, and so on. And their dedication and creativity have transformed today's events into reality. So once again, thank you so much to the organizing committee. You did a very great job.
Good morning. As we look around us today, the stakes could not be more urgent. Humanity has already pushed 6 out of the 9 planetary boundaries beyond their safe limits, and we're doing so at an unprecedented pace. The window to halt and reverse this trajectory is rapidly narrowing. Climate change is no longer a distant concern. It is already reshaping our ecosystems, economies, and daily lives. And yet, we have reasons to stay hopeful. If science, industry, and policy work together across disciplines and borders, transformative change is not only possible, but within reach. That spirit of cooperation and imagination is what guides this year's theme, the elephant in the system, moving the immovable. Throughout the day, we will confront energy and resource-intensive sectors, those so deeply embedded in our daily lives that rethinking them can feel overwhelming. And yet, these are precisely the areas where change is most critical if we are to thrive sustainably as a global society. Going into details, the program includes panels on sustainable urban transformation and on food systems, masterclasses diving into narratives and language for the ecological transition and into local energy communities, and lastly, a discussion around how citizens' participation represents an essential step towards a fair and inclusive systemic change. As we move through the day, I encourage you to keep a few guiding words in mind: system thinking, societal goals, participation, and shared responsibility. Today is about more than dialogue, it's about action. We encourage you to engage boldly, ask questions, challenge entrenched logics, and connect with one another. The solutions we need will only emerge through open exchange, collaboration, and constructive critique. Let's now begin. Karin, the floor is yours. Thank you, everyone.
Ginevra and Rafa. I'm always very thrilled and happy to be here because it's organized by students. I think it's one of the few, if not the only, event here at EPFL that is just done by and with students and with experts to come. Thank you so much for having me here. And before we actually start, let me ask you some questions. And it's really nice because I can see all of your hands. Raise your hand if you agree. Who feels like in public transport no one talks to each other because everybody is looking at their own device? All of the hands are up. Wonderful. So, who has talked to a stranger last week? Yeah? Who has talked to a stranger today? All right. Now we should define stranger, probably. We won't. Who needs to commute to work and it takes more than 15 minutes? All right, also a lot of people. Who lives in an apartment that's bigger than 100 square meters? 2. Okay, who lives in an apartment that's bigger than 100 square meters alone? I'm so glad nobody raised their hand. Who likes to go to supermarkets? Yeah, a whole bunch, we're used to that. So who likes to go to supermarkets because we can buy avocados all year around? No one? All right, the question here probably would be, who loves avocados? Ah, so some seasonal people here. All right, yeah, and with that, you know, thinking about supermarkets, who of you feels overwhelmed at times because there's so many products and you just cannot make up your mind? Yes, okay. So, last one, solar panels. Who's got a solar panel on their roof? 1, okay. Who would like to have a solar panel on their roof but they can't influence it? All right, so there's some work to be done there. Thank you so much. And who feels like climate change and all these topics are really, really important, but we just don't know how to move the people to come along? Also many hands, and that's what we're going to talk today. How do you move the elephant, this immovable big thing? I'm really thrilled to have great experts here. We're going to talk about things where you can actually take action yourself, empowerment, and we're going to start in a place, yeah, it concerns us all. How do we live, in what house, where at? And that's something we can influence ourselves. That's what we're going to talk about, and the good news actually first. We're going to have someone from the canton of Basel-Stadt here who will tell us how they're doing it. Basel-Stadt, I may say, is one of the cantons that are extremely advanced when it comes to wanting to go net zero. The government alone says by 2030 we'll be there, and the entire canton should be there by 2037. And I'm so thrilled to hear how they're doing it. A very warm welcome to Philippe Noger, Head of Office for Environmentally Sound Planning and Construction in Basel-Stadt. Bitte sehr.
Thank you. Hello, thanks for the welcome, thanks for inviting me. My name is Philippe, I'm an architect and I'm an environmental engineer. I studied at EPFL also, like 25 years ago. So I was happy to come here. But today I want to talk to you about my present work in the canton of Basel. But first of all, I want to show you some pictures from my garden. Now, we moved in a new house like 5 years ago, and there we had this plant. Maybe are there some biologists around? Nobody knows? Sorry about that. It's an American plant. It comes from North America. It's a Hamamelis. And what's special about this plant is that it flowers in the winter. Exactly on the 6th of January. We have a little come together with our neighbors, and the main topic of this meeting is always, is it flowering already or not yet? So this plant, usually it flowers exactly on the 6th of January. But you see here in October 23, there were the first flowers appearing on this tree. And I was a little bit upset. I mean, I'm a little bit confused. But my wife, she is a landscape architect, and she said, don't you worry too much. It's also trees, they get old. Sometimes They don't know what exactly they have to do. And they start flowering too early. I said, okay. And then a couple of weeks later, I had this plant on my terrace. And that's a Mediterranean plant. It's called the arbutus, strawberry tree. And also the arbutus is special because it flowers twice a year. It flowers in the spring and it flowers in the fall. And that's a picture from October also. You see the flowers and you see the fruits. But now what's special is this one. That's a bumblebee. It's a bumblebee queen. And I can tell you now, my wife, she's a specialist on plants, but I'm a specialist on bumblebees. I do this since my childhood. I take care of bumblebees. And what's special, really special, is that this is a bumblebee queen, and it's supposed to be in hibernation. In October, they are supposed to be in hibernation, and they only come out of the ground like now, February, January, February, March, April. So this queen, she woke up too early. And that's really a pity, because she won't survive the winter. She will die, she will not go in hibernation again. And what worried me most is, I did not see one or two queens, I saw dozens of queens end October. So things are really starting to change in nature. And what I want to talk to you is also, like I'm an architect, you know, architects, if they see a gray wall or a gray surface, they think it's a wall. The engineer, if he sees a rope, he thinks about statics and stuff. And you can go on. And of course, the gray elephant in the room, everybody sees it from his perspective. My wife, she saw it as a landscape architect. I see the problem as somebody who likes bumblebees, and maybe you see it on your way. But altogether, the gray elephant, of course, is the CO2, and that's what I'm here for today. You all know this graph, I guess. A couple of years ago, I always said, look what our generation before us did, my parents. But I have to admit now, I have to say, look what my generation did. And I fear that you will have to say the same thing also for your generation. So it's really impressive. If you see, I was born in 1969, so we started up really burning everything that can be burned on this world. And, but the good news is, young people, they made in Basel, they made the climate strike, and they really put up some pressure on the government also. And a couple of years ago, Basel declared climate emergency, and we ended up with the climate protection strategy. That was made from the government of the canton of Basel-Stadt, with the goal of 2037 to be equal to net zero. And that's a graph I borrowed from a friend. Actually, it's a colleague of Oliver's. It's a Minergie Fachstelle in Basel. But I like the graph very much. It shows a little bit how we can do the transformation. You have the different instruments and things we can do on the right-hand side, and you see how we have to reach net zero. It won't be an easy way. And we are very much in the beginning. Can I put the... okay. So you see, nowadays we're still working on knowledge and awareness. We try to get people together, like here. We have different instruments that have to be developed by Minergie and other companies. What we are trying to do in Basel also to have a favorable framework for CO2 reductions. And at the end, of course, there is always the possibility of regulation, which will be at the end, or to reach the goal necessary, maybe. So, I want to talk to you about those two things, how we work on knowledge and awareness, and how we work on favorable frameworks and strict regulations. So what we can do as a public actor, we can create awareness and knowledge, and we are trying to be a good example. And that's what Basel is all doing already several years. It's also a reason why I personally went to Basel. I made this step like only 2 years ago. I was working in Zurich before, and as Basel had its new goals, I decided that I might as well change to Basel. And that's the goal of the climate protection strategy. You see, we start here around 2020. We are trying to go down all the way up to here, 2035. And then you see we have a major gap here, and that's the CCS technology we are going to introduce there. So there will be a carbon capture and storage program at the Kehrichtverbrennungsanlage, the site where we burn all the waste. And politics hope that this will bring us down to zero. But of course, it's a technical solution, and we are very curious whether it will work. We don't have. But the fact is, I'm working in the building sector. And if you look in the building sector, you have direct emissions and indirect emissions. For the last 20 years, I was working on the direct emissions, the red ones. That's what we use in the operation of the buildings. Because many years we said, you know, the indirect emissions you can't do a lot. It's quite hard. You have to have industry to change. But of course, if we talk about net zero, we have to address these indirect emissions here. And that's a way how you can see. Are there some architects in the room? You don't know these buildings, I guess. So I will show you, these are quite famous architectural buildings from the last years. We have on the here, we have the building called K118. It is built from scratch with used parts. So we have this old building down here, and on the top, it's in Winterthur. On the top, they took the construction from Basel, and they put it on the top of the existing building. So you see, if we do the calculations for indirect emissions, we end up here around 4.0 kilograms per square meter, which is very good, which is the best that we can do today. Actually, today we are around 10 to 12 kilograms with our normal projects. This is a project by Herzog and de Meuron, very famous architects. They tried to do as good as they could. They started here in the planning with 6 kilograms. I've heard they are getting now up. It's in construction now. So it's really very difficult to reach those goals. Then there is a school in Zurich, which you see, it has an existing building and it is combined with a new construction, which also helps if you can reuse the whole construction. Of course, you bring it down to about 7 or 8 kilograms. And that's what we did in Basel. It was a big site from Coop, supermarket, a distribution center. And we decided not to destroy it, but to reuse it. So they literally cut into the building a new street, and they refurbished all the other buildings. On the right, you have a school from Basel. And on the left, it's the Elis. It's a place where different artists and also little shops and stuff can find a place. So we reused the whole construction. And that's even one step further. On the same place, there was a parking garage. And Basel, we decided that we are going to reuse all the parts from this parking garage. So we made a competition with architects, and you see these big parts. They are taken down from the parking space, and they are reconstructing now space to live in. It's a housing project, which is made out of those parts that are coming from the parking lot. So that was one project. It's about 100 apartments that we are going to build in this way. And another one is the Schlierengerweg. Also here you see the same elements. If you see here, they use those static elements to hold the building, and you can find those same elements also in the Schlierengerweg. That's the situation where they are now, in the parking lot. So we take them all down. You can see it's even a construction that is facilitates this reuse. So that's what we are trying to do as a good example. It is one of the most easiest way to come down with the indirect emissions. But with the climate protection plan, which was finished in 2023, and then we had a plan of action last year, which says how can we really achieve net zero in the whole canton. So this is always the same question. You saw it also in the Canton de Vaud, no? There is Madame, what's the Regierungsrätin? She was responsible for the finances of the canton, Madame Dittli. What ended she up with the environment? They took away the finances and they gave her the environment, whatever this means. But similar things we are thinking about Basel. We want to find a solution where we can work with money and where we can introduce taxes to facilitate the transition to net zero. And in Basel we have like special experiences. We have an incentive tax for electricity in Basel since 20 years. It's very small, but nevertheless. We have a tradition of Mehrwertabschöpfung, which says land value capture. In Zurich, if a company wants to build a high-rise building, everybody says, you know what, I don't really like this kind of gray. Maybe it should be a little bit smaller. In Basel, if Roche says, I want to build a tower, the canton says, people from the canton, they say, okay, let's build a tower. We got 30 million in our pocket to ameliorate other things in the city. And we have also the situation that we have canton and city that are together, which makes we are producing the law and also we are enforcing the law. So what we have, we want to introduce legal thresholds for scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. And we want to ask for compliance with those thresholds through a CO2 incentive tax. This means we don't have to check whether the people really reach the thresholds, but we want to have a tax that is steering that we can reach a threshold at the end. And also, I want to skip this, we're going to have a compensation fee for non-amortized greenhouse gases. Usually you think buildings, they exist for 60 years. Many buildings are broken down earlier. So if you break it down, you will have to pay a compensation fee for those stuff, for those greenhouse gas emissions that are going to be destroyed. And also, we are trying to identify and reduce barriers to refurbishment. Like this is also an old warehouse. It was transformed to a housing complex. And also here we want to ameliorate the situations. We want to make it easier that architects can transform the buildings. And for that, we are checking our legal normative regulations, whether we can make it easier to the transformation. Of course, we have others. We have also one incentive for more sufficiency, which is important, of course, but which is also difficult to transform. We want to optimize circularity. We try to optimize knowledge transfer, and also we want to have a credit for climate-friendly innovations. But all this is going to be part of my work in the next 2 years, and we hope to end up with interesting suggestions. The hope for myself is like this. It's a crow that made this nest. And if you see closely, the crow, she uses those spikes that we use to protect our buildings with. And the intelligence of the animal made it remove those spikes to use it to protect their own nest. And I think that's something we have to do also with our architecture. We really to find solutions to net zero, we have to be rather inventive, and we have to try out all different stuff. That's, I guess, thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much, Philippe. Before you sit down, let me ask you one question. We saw all those buildings that were reused, renovated, or given another purpose. I would assume it's more sustainable than built from scratch, right? Is it also less expensive?
That's a good question. We are trying to find out right now. Our first experiences are that it can be less expensive, but it always comes together with aesthetics. You have seen the car 118. It's a building they built with used materials. But of course, it's like they used the old materials. And it was an architect that was ready to do this. He had a new aesthetic of bricolage, which he was proud of. Now we often have the situation that we have architects, they think, well, it's cool to work with reuse elements, but at the end, I would prefer if it looks like new. And in that moment, you start to pay for it. If you have to repaint it, it's going to be costly. You have to have all the logistics that fit together, which is costly also. So at the moment, we are investing quite some money into that. And to be honest, nobody really wants to know how much money we spent there.
All right, we'll leave it at that, but I'm sure, thank you so much, Philippe. I'm sure we're going to get some economic insight in just a second. Our next guest is an economist and a professor. He's the head of the Laboratory of Urban and Environmental Economics, LEUR, which is part of the Natural, Architectural and Built Environment faculty, ENAC, at EPFL. He teaches real estate and housing economics and also economics of climate change, growth, and sustainable development. So, with his vast experience, he's going to tell us what it takes from an economical side. Warm welcome to Philippe Thalmann.
Thank you very much. Uh-oh. Do you have my presentation somewhere?
Wer gaat helpen? Ah, there you go.
Oh, right. Got it. Thank you. I'll start with a complicated slide. It's going to be the most complicated one, but we have time to look at it. It summarizes a lot of information about the energy use and CO2 emissions related to housing in Switzerland since 1990 to 2023, the last year for which we have data on all of this. And it's all represented in index format, so we start from 100 in 1990, and let's focus first on the black curve, which is CO2 emissions in housing related to maintaining temperature, warming the houses, but also warm water. And what you observe is that between 1990 and 2005, it was just essentially wiggling around a constant value. It's only been decreasing since 2005. down to a value of 52, which means a 48% reduction. That's the interpretation. 52 means 48% reduction, 114 means 14% increase. Right, so 48% reduction in CO2 emissions from housing, which is quite good. There are not many sectors that achieve that, certainly not transportation. But when you look at the green one, it could have been even more. We could have had a 65% reduction. The green one, that's CO2 emissions per square meter of energy reference area, that is the heated surface, to simplify. So per square meter, we have done actually much better. There was a substantial two-third reduction in emissions, which can be attributed to two factors. One is energy efficiency, and the other one is energy substitution. That is less energy, that's the gray one, and CO2 emissions per energy, energy efficiency is energy consumption per square meter of energy reference area. That's the pink, which went down to 42% reduction. So that's more efficient insulation, buildings, energy use in warming water and warming houses. And the other one, the substitution, is CO2 emissions per energy unit. That is replacing fossil by renewable energy, essentially, which emits a lot less CO2. And there also we have a substantial. So it's really both which have helped. And so we could have had a much larger decrease in emissions. The reason we didn't is that the energy reference area increased. That is, there is more surface to be heated. And that's partly due to rising population, which would be this blue line here, to 32% greater population in 2023 than in 1990. But it's not only that, it's also the energy reference area per person that has continued rising. Not that much, 14%, but nevertheless, together with the population rise, the surface to be heated has gone up by half between 1990 and 2023. So you see that part of the potential improvement, part of the efforts to make houses more energy efficient and switching to renewables was lost to growing affluence, one could say. Now, if we look to the future, if I try to extrapolate, I removed many of my curves, but I keep the CO2 curve, the black one. As I said, up to 2005, pretty much constant, and then really it started decrease. And if we extrapolate the evolution linearly since 2005, we are actually quite nicely on track. In 2040, we would be at minus 84%, which is even a bit better than the energy and climate law, which says minus 82%, and we would be down to zero even before 2050, which is again the content of the law. So it looks like we are on track for CO2 emissions. We're not doing so bad either in terms of energy, not quite as good. So energy consumption has not decreased as much as CO2 emissions because there's not the substitution effect. But still, we would be down by 30% in 2050. Energy use is also important, not just CO2, because we have this problem in the winter. We may not have enough electricity. And so it's also important to think of energy use and not just replacing fossil by renewable energy. So from this, it looks like we are on track. The one thing to be aware of, though, is that it's going to be more and more difficult. Typically, when you have to improve buildings, you start with the least efficient ones. You start by small measures which allow to save 10, 20, 30% sometimes of energy simply by better regulating the operation of the system. So there's quite a bit that can be done, and that was done at relatively little cost. But the further you go down, the more complex and the more costly it will be. So it's a bit hazardous to just extrapolate the way I did. It could very well be that it flattens out because it becomes increasingly difficult to refurbish all houses. Now, more elements of context. 54% of all residential buildings still have a fossil-based heating system, heating oil or natural gas. 54%, more than half of the buildings are still fossil-based. So that there's still a great need for substitution. They need to move away from fossil. About a third of all buildings have an energy efficiency label F or G, which is the worst one. And in the Vaud climate law and also in many other cantons, there is a time limit to refurbish these buildings. But So that's about a third of the buildings, but then the better ones, the E or the D or the C, in a certain sense, they also consume too much energy. They're also insufficiently energy efficient, so there's actually many more buildings that need to be improved, made more energy efficient. In a sense, buildings should stop being a burden on the energy system. They should become a source of energy. They should contribute to the energy system rather than draw on the energy system. They have the potential to do that. A, B buildings do that. But then, if we look also beyond the F and G, the third of those buildings, then we are talking about 2/3 of buildings that need to be refurbished. And they need to be refurbished within 25 years. So if you think 2/3, maybe 3/4 even of buildings to be refurbished in the next 25 years to 2050, we're talking about renovation rates, refurbishment rates, way beyond the current 1%, maybe 2%, some people say 3%. So 3% refurbishment rate means we need to put 3 times as much effort into improving the existing buildings as we have done until now, right? Now, well, we could just hire more people, but already now 42% of construction spending is for maintenance and transformation of existing buildings and infrastructure, so there's quite a bit that is already spent on refurbishment, which explains why we have this improvement. We cannot recruit. We cannot, it's not plausible that the workforce would increase sufficiently for the additional refurbishment needs, right? For all sorts of reasons, mainly because, of course, it's very much related to immigration. A lot of the workers in construction are not born in Switzerland, and there's not a huge political willingness to increase immigration. And already now, this is a sector that has very great recruiting difficulties, so it's not plausible to expect that many more workers would be hired to do the refurbishment. So where do they come from? Well, they have to be moved from new construction. Okay, so instead of new construction, they would have to focus, we need to move the workforce, the resources, the construction sector away from new build towards improving the existing stock. Now that's not so easy because we have housing shortage. And that's not a surprise. If you look at the data again, between 1990 and 2005, when we had the CO2 emissions, which were not improving very much, on average, 106 dwellings were built for 100 persons added to the population. So the ratio of dwellings to ratio of people was 106 to 100, very comfortable. Since 2006, it's only 70 dwellings for 100 persons. So we have a very much lower construction rate since 2006, and that explains probably why we have this perceived feeling of housing shortage. So, in other words, it would be necessary to concentrate at least twice as much construction resources on the existing stock, but that's going to be difficult. It's not going to be that easy. Now, is it possible actually to stop building dwellings after all, right? And that's a graph that represents this energy reference area I was mentioning earlier. The area of a rectangle is the total surface. So you have the population on the horizontal axis, you have the energy reference area per person on the vertical, and the product of the two is going to be the total energy reference area. So it were 346 square kilometers in 1990, increased to 450. And since then, actually, it's interesting to see that between 1990 and 2008, we had more people, but we had also more area per person. Between 2008 and 2025, we have more people, so there was housing area added for the additional population, but there was no more an improvement in comfort. So it's not more square meter per person. And if we went back to the square meter per person of 1990, and we expect a population of 10.4 million inhabitants in 2050, we would need actually 440 square kilometers. So that's 10.4 million people times the energy reference area, 52 something of 1990, 450 square kilometers, which is what we have. We are almost there, right? We have almost enough housing area to host everybody at the housing standards of 1990, not at the housing standards of 2024, of course. So the proposition is to better use the existing housing area to host more people instead of continuously adding more surface. And the way it could work is illustrated here in a fictitious building which has a total energy reference area of 1,100 square meters. That's the size of the building. And in 2020, it's hosting 20 people. And every one of these 20 people have on average 45 square meter available per person. That's their private, that's their apartment. And there is a little bit of circulation space and laundry room and bicycle storage, which to some extent can also be counted in the area under some conditions. That would be about 200 square meters of that, which is shared energy reference area, but it's not really habitable, doesn't count. So in total, we have 55 square meter per person, the 1,100 divided by 45 people, okay? And each of them has 200 of this shared, plus the 45 individual, or if you want in terms of housing, habitable energy reference area, there's nothing really shared for habitat, there's the 45 square meter, everyone has 45 square meters. Let's say in 2030, there's now 30 people living here. How is that possible? Well, we have a little bit less space per person. The reserved area, it goes down to 25 square meters, but then we share much more, because we still have the 1,100 square meters, so 25 times 30, that leaves room for shared habitat, like kitchen could be shared, dining rooms could be shared, room for visitors. You don't need a guest room because you have very seldom guests. Work areas, you don't need an office in your apartment. You could have a shared work area, play areas, and so forth. All of that could be shared. And the interesting thing to see is that even though there is more people, there is fewer square meter per person. The building hosts more people. The 1,100 square meters divided now by 30 people, 32 square meter per person, but everyone has more space available because they have their private space, the 32, but they also have the shared space, the 150, okay? And it should actually be 182, I'm not sure. No, it's the 25 plus the 150. That's the space that they have, habitat, shared habitat and private habitat. And we could even go further, and everybody has the equivalent of hotel room available, just a little bedroom and a shower cabin. That's all that is privatized, and much more is offered to be shared, like sanitary facilities. You could have a music room, you could have a projection room, workshop. You can imagine all sorts of shared spaces, which would make more space available for everyone, because you would have all that space available, but you wouldn't keep it to yourself. For yourself, you only have 12 square meters. Okay, so that is kind of a model where you can have more space, more comfort for everyone, and yet fewer square meter per person, or more, what is important, more people living in the same buildings. If you move as far as this model here, there's actually way too much space available, because we are going much beyond the 1990 reference. Okay, so once you have way too much space available, you can start thinking about decommissioning some of the buildings. Some of the buildings would not have to be renovated anymore, because they're not necessary anymore to host 10.4 million people. We would start with buildings that have a number of shortcomings. There would be not cleanup costs, refurbishment costs, or renovation costs, that's a mistake, sorry. Low heritage quality, poor accessibility, so in locations where you have, which not possible to have public transportation, maybe exposure to natural hazard, more and more a topic, would be they sitting on potentially valuable biodiversity sites, or they could be refurbished for agriculture. I mean, that's the kind of buildings that would be decommissioned, that would be removed, unbuilt, and so we could save on the need to refurbish, because there would be much fewer. And of course, the accompanying measure is that the other buildings, the ones we keep, are refurbished and transformed in such a way that they can accommodate more residents. And you can start thinking about a circular economy with reuse of components from these buildings and so forth. I'm coming to the end of my presentation, my last slide, which is a kind of a picture representation of what we are thinking about. This is in Zurich, the Hunziker Areal, where you have those privatized, and still not very small. That's not 12 square meter per person, but then nevertheless much smaller than standard apartments, and a lot of shared spaces and equipment already, like this kitchen, dining room, which is shared among the residents. And this offers, I think, very nice habitat, and I'm happy to discuss that during the round table. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Philippe Thalmann. One question for you, however, though. You know how it is said, my home is my castle. I also work as a mediator, and the hardest conflicts, the meanest ones, are always the ones between people who possess a house or an apartment because they don't want to share. Is it just going to be a lot more work for me, or is that actually why it's difficult to transfer all of that? I mean, it makes total sense what you're saying, but aren't we accumulating a lot of social problems with that?
It's a different mode of habitat, obviously. There are already lots of people who live like that, mostly because they cannot afford differently. So it's often the result of economic pressure, like students sharing an apartment, cohabitat. It should not be that. It should be really a social project. It should be a transformation in the way we live. Just a number, half of the apartments in the cities are inhabited by one person. So when you walk through Lausanne, to Bern, to Zurich, to Basel, think of every second apartment is just one person. And we're not talking small apartments. Is that socially desirable? Is that how we want to live? Do we want to go on until everybody, 90% of the apartments are occupied by one person? Is that the goal? No. I think we need to, but I understand, I'm not saying this is going to happen tomorrow. I'm not saying that 99% of the population will adhere to this model. I'm also aware that there's the problem of the single family houses, but they can also be divided, actually maybe sometimes even easier than multifamily. So, right, in a way, what I recommend is something that we see in the office world. It's very common when an office building is refurbished, the working area is completely reorganized. We are going towards open space, and then we're moving back towards individuals, and we keep changing models, but that shows that it's possible to rearrange the surface of a building in such a way to accommodate maybe different ways of living, and I think that's what we should also do. What we do for offices, we should also do for housing. But I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it is necessary. And it's probably not worse than what we are moving, the path we're moving along.
Thank you so much. We keep on discussing just now on the panel. I would invite you to take a seat. And I'm also asking Philippe Noger to come back here to the front. And as a third guest, I'd love to add Olivier Meile. He's the head of Minergie Romandie, and he's also the director Romand of the SNBS. That's not a bank, it's the standard for sustainable construction in Switzerland. He's been an energy engineer and also in the building sector for most of his life. Thank you so much.
Did you want to sit in the middle?
No, that's okay. Let me see, and if anyone wants to join from the audience here, would be an empty seat, if you feel like it. I do have this nice cube, and it contains a microphone, so I would love to add you to the discussion, and I will just be tossing this into the audience, and I hope I'm not killing anyone with it, so it gets to sit here. Well, it's always lovely to have good ideas, coming up. But then let me start with the global worry at the moment. If we look over, globally, the trend seems to go otherwise. Sustainability programs being killed, and also if you look at it nationally, the Swiss Federal Council plans to scale back the building program 2027. All of those things you're suggesting, that it's going to cost money, obviously, there will be the need of subsidies, and now politics or policy is just cutting back. I mean, do you feel that already in your profession? And what do you reckon are the consequences of this? Do you want to start from an economic side?
I don't feel it in my profession because I'm not day-to-day with developers. I think for the time being, we are a bit shielded from these pressures, but consider the proposal I make to densify existing buildings, to have more people living there. It's an economic model. It's a business model. It's a business case. If you have 45 people living in a house instead of 20, there's 45 people who can share. It's like maybe, how many students are living in shared apartments? Right. Why do you do that? Because you want to live with friends, or because you say you can't afford your own apartment?
Who wants to live with friends? Hands up, please.
Good. So it's a social project. It's not just an economic one, but it has its...
And who saves money with it?
The question is, who pays much more as a group for an apartment than if the apartment was occupied by the regular family? And probably that's the other thing. It pushes up the rents, of course, to do that, to have more people share the apartment. That's not the model. I'm not encouraging, of course, real estate to be even more profitable. It's already extremely profitable business, but it shows that it should be possible. It should be attractive for the owners. They can pay for the refurbishment by having more people sharing the cost of the refurbishment and the transformation. And fundamentally, it should be economically possible, shouldn't it? So we don't even need political support for that, do we?
But let's still talk a bit about policy. And I mean, that program was supposed to support energy-efficient renovations and replacement of fossil fuel. You said 54% are still running on fossil fuel. Those policies, will we feel them? And I mean, what do you feel like the consequences are?
Well, for us, we don't feel it yet on our daily business, but we are seeing the first negative trends, I would say. So we take care of, on one side, we take care of Minergie and SNBS, as you said in the beginning. So it's building standards, basically, where we define several requirements that buildings have to meet, with Minergie focused on energy and CO2, and with the SNBS focused, or not focused, let's say very widely, considering social, economic, and architectural aspects, for example. And in that area is not too touched for the moment. I would even say the trend is more positive. Like last week here on the other side in the Swiss Tech Convention Center, there was this big real estate meeting with all the professionals that we associate more with making loads of money with in the building sector. And these guys are starting now to have also a sensitivity for sustainability, is maybe exaggerated, but at least they can see that building sustainably is also beneficial for them, because there are more and more people who want to live in sustainable buildings or to buy sustainable buildings. So that's the one trend I see. And on the other side, as you said, we have all this political trend that is more like on the brakes. And for us, one of the main issues we are concerned about is the building program, le programme bâtiment en français, which is a big funding program for refurbishment of housing in Switzerland. And this program is discussed at the moment to see if it should be continued or not, regarding big, how do you say, the plan d'économie that they have to do at the federal level. So this signals also for the people who are getting there now, starting to think that sustainability is also good for business. And you have these political signals on the other side that are breaking. So we are in kind of a critical phase, I would say, yes. And the consequences, in our point of view, will be quite short term, like in 2-3 years, something like that. So yeah, something we have to be worried about, I would say.
Philippe Noger, how does the canton of Basel-Stadt react to it? Do you say, well, we don't care what the state is doing, we have our own programs, subsidies going, we don't care? How do you go about it?
No, actually we have a quite similar situation in Basel also. If you look at it historically, you can say we had somebody in Basel who pushed this topic very strongly. It was Beat Jans, who is now at the federal government. He was basically, you can say, he was responsible till 2 or 3 years ago to really implement a net zero goal in the constitution of the canton. Now he moved to Bern, which you have to say, yeah, it's kind of difficult also for this topic than now in Basel. Okay? You always have to have people who push it on the political side. Beat, he ended up in the asylum spectrum, far away from all the Gebäudeprogramm and everything. So I also see it's a kind of a difficult situation for all these environmental topics in politics right now. Of course, it's still the case that if I start talking about net zero, nobody says, oh, we can't do that. Everybody says, we have to do it. That's the only way to do it. But, as you mentioned before, I'm very curious now when slowly it also gets clear that this decision, it costs something. You cannot have it for free. And there you need a lot of support from politics and from the public. And we will see how far the support will go. It won't be that easy.
I mean, Philippe Thalmann, you said we should renovate about 3 times more, 3% instead of 1% as we are doing now. And that's certainly not going to help the trend, right?
The 3% renovation is a number that comes actually, it's an old number based on the experience that after between 30, 40 years, a building starts having a lot of difficult problems. Plus, also it's not just a matter of becoming old in terms of worn out, it's also obsolete in the sense that the kind of technical features it's proposing, the mode of habitat is no longer of the day. And so 3% has always been kind of a recommendation at which rate, maybe not a full refurbishment, but nevertheless something has to be done. Now we arrive at the same number when we look just at how many buildings need to go through energy refurbishment. This, under current situation, it is extremely difficult. I'm fully aware of that. We looked into who owns all those buildings and who has the means to pay for the refurbishment, and we come to the conclusion that most people, especially single-family houses, 1 million single-family houses, remember, need many owned by elderly people who cannot borrow, who don't have sufficient savings, or maybe for them it's too complicated. So there's a whole problem around that. It's not just even more subsidies would not help. Even when the Gebäudeprogramm, the buildings program was still very generous, they still didn't do it because of all those other barriers. And so you can do 2 things. You can either push them even more, that is to pay for the full refurbishment, to provide free consulting services and so forth, or you could think of another model where maybe somebody would take over the building and this person would live in a smaller part, kind of divide the building, and they would live in a smaller apartment, and there would be 2 other apartments, and the new inhabitants pay for the refurbishment. I mean, there is models, but it needs developers. It's not going to be the owners themselves who can do it. So it's another, really, it's a new business sector, I think.
The developers, but also there, I've talked to quite a few of those single-family home owners. They said, well, it costs me a few £100 to live in there. If I want to change to an apartment, that's actually going to be a lot more expensive for a lot less space. You know, so people don't even leave their house, and especially if they're not leaving, they're also not going to change and add someone to it, no?
You know, we had an interesting incentive on this behalf in Basel. Mm-hmm. It was my colleagues from the housing department. They had exactly this situation. We had a lot of elderly people that live in big apartments, even in single-family houses, quite a few in Basel. And they said, well, we're going to have a program to enhance the change. Like, you have a young family with 3 kids, they want to have a bigger apartment. They just change the apartments, and they have a plan to adjust for costs. Like the old man who is living alone in the big apartment, he doesn't pay much rent because it's an old apartment. So he moves into a new, a more expensive apartment maybe, but the young family, they cover the surplus charges. It is a very attractive situation, you should think, because the old man, he gets a smaller apartment, he gets a lift in the house and everything, an elevator. But it was, guess how many times last year people asked for this program? It's 3 or 4 in a population of 200,000.
Is it a matter of marketing?
I don't think so. They're really trying hard they tell it everybody. If you are interested in it, you find this offer from the state.
What is it? Are we just bequem would be the German expression?
Inertia, there's a lot of inertia in the housing market. Yeah.
It's also the idea of comfort that we have probably, and this is more like that's the whole baseline behind all these problems. I mean, we are trying to change kind of a philosophy or what we consider being a good lifestyle or accomplishing a good life and stuff like that. And the things we are doing are just a small part of that. And that's for me the main a bit frustration in the business I'm in, that we are just trying to change kind of the way of addressing a problem, like for this example, getting people to live in a space that is more suitable for what they actually need, that would be more comfortable for them. But we are so driven from this idea that we having succeeded in life is having a big space, having a car, having a garden and whatever, that it's very difficult to change, especially for elderly people who have had all their life in this mentality. And that's where we are struggling at the moment from one point of view. And that's the good thing in the building sector. In the end, in the building sector, you can really build much more efficiently, provide everything without emitting any more CO2, without doing any compromises on your comfort. But in the end, it's just a very small part of the equation. If you really want to change something, our mentalities have to change also, and we have to consider otherwise what is having a good life, and that's going to take.
But I like a little side question, but especially like Minergie. If I listen around what people say about Minergie, then that would also be like mean you change a bit on like how you live or how you build a house, and they say yeah, but then like you have to build in a ventilation system, you can't open the windows, and it's too expensive.
We get that a lot, of course. This idea about the ventilation sticks to us till the beginning. But it's as crazy as saying because you have a ventilation system in your car, you can't open the window anymore. I mean, it's not connected. It has nothing to do with one another. Sometimes, unfortunately, we are instrumentalized in the sense that architects don't want to have windows that you can open because you can have bigger glazing surfaces and it's aesthetically, let's say, more attractive.
And they don't have to clean the windows because you can't.
Especially. Although we address that issue too, in all the sustainable building standards, you have to look at how you are going to clean the building and how you will have to exploit it to make it easy for the people who have to do it. But so in the end, yeah, this ventilation thing, it has nothing to do with Minergie, and quite the opposite. I mean, having a house where you can open the windows is a very important psychological comfort aspect. Even if you don't, because when you walk in a space where the air doesn't smell, I don't know, it's not humid or whatever, you're not specially driven to open the window. But still, the fact that you can do it, like the fact that you can set the temperature in your house or stuff like that, makes you feel more comfortable because you don't feel that something is imposed to you. You can act on your environment, and that makes human beings feel better.
You're in charge, basically.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with the Minergie. I agree totally with what he says. Minergie, he sets standards and everything and makes their life more comfortable. But on the other hand, and that's maybe the original question, it turned away the view from the emissions per capita. We are used now to look at all the emissions per square meter, and all the questions of sufficiency, they got lost in the last 20 years. And so now it made me feel good. I can live in a single family housing way out in the green, in a Minergie house, and I have a very nice CO2 footprint, and I have even my solar panels on the roof. But on the other hand, what is really necessary is to have the sufficiency that Mr. Thalmann also asked, or that that's the biggest levy we have to come down, but it's also the hardest one. You have seen we have it also in one action. We want to try to augment the sufficiency of the buildings, and everybody says, well, that's a good idea, and then there comes nothing more. Because people, they don't really know how we can do it, do they? I think it's cooperatives that can show the way, and in many cities we have very interesting, like Meer als Wonen in the Hunziker area. We have also in Basel interesting initiatives for cooperatives that try to redefine co-living. And that's one possibility we have, and I'm confident that the young generation, they will find out new ways, and they will get used to live together in different ways than we have in the past.
So basically saying it's also a generational thing. That
I think
it's
it helps.
just clear we don't have a single family home. Things have to change.
It's not just the generation, or it's not just the young. Usually we understand students are used to sharing, and as soon as they can, they have their own apartment or their own house, even better. It's also more and more elderly people who find it much better, easier to live in a community than isolated in an apartment. Let me give you one more number here. As I said, in the cities, it's half of the dwellings. Switzerland-wise, it's 37% of the dwellings which are occupied by a single person. In Canton Basel-Stadt, even 47% at the cantonal level. But that's not because these are lots of small apartments. Only 19% are one or two room apartments. So 37% of the dwellings are occupied by one person. 19% of the occupied apartments, have one or two rooms. Many more have, all the other ones have many more than that. And Basel is 32%, one or two rooms. It's a bit, I didn't want to use the word sufficiency, because it has, sometimes people understand sacrifice or moral or whatever.
Have to give up something.
Yeah, exactly. You have to. That's the sacrifice side, or also this moral aspect that, sobriété, that you have to behave well or whatever, to live good, decent and so forth. I want to call it efficiency. I mean, we have a housing stock that is occupied by large apartments occupied by one person. How could that be efficient? This is not efficient. We're not using our housing stock efficiently. It's incredible. We have 15% of all dwellings in Switzerland which are second homes. 18% in the city of Geneva. You know the housing situation in Geneva? 18% of these apartments are second homes. Isn't that absurd? Isn't that crazy?
And the other half is Airbnb.
Exactly. It's not even counted there, so it's even more. 337 municipalities exceed the constitutional limit that says it shouldn't be more than 20%.
But then are we back to policy? What does it take? What does it take to move the people on the one hand and the decision makers to say, hey, that can't be the future?
It takes measures on all levels. There's the perception thing, I think that's very important, because it's kind of a consensus between the construction, the real estate, the land, and the banking. All of those are interested in us desiring to buy a house or to live in large luxurious apartments, and they encourage this and they make it possible also. It must be said, lots of people live in comfortable dwellings. That's great. We have very good housing conditions in Switzerland. So there's this consensus to move us in that direction, and I think it needs everyone to it's not going to be easy, because there's also our pension money to some extent that is invested in that. There's a huge construction sector, of course.
They all want to make a revenue.
Even municipalities are interested in selling constructible land, having more inhabitants, good taxpayers in large single-family houses. I mean, everything gets together to move us on this unsustainable track of bigger apartments, bigger houses, even though our households are smaller and smaller. It's just absurd.
So the bigger and bigger is a trend that's going on. At the same time, prices are going up for apartments, for houses, for everything. How do you deal with creating new living space, for instance, in Basel-Stadt, and at the same time make it affordable?
At the same time?
Making it affordable for people who might not have that much money.
That's a big problem. In Basel we have a new law also that protects old buildings. Like you cannot just invest a lot of money and then
raise the rent.
They raise the rents. And there are even people in Basel now that say that this pretty much blocked the new construction sector because nobody wants to invest anymore in Basel. I don't see that yet, but of course there are some tendencies and we have to be very much aware of it. What Basel has very special is we have like these huge transformation areas. There are industrial sites that become now transformed into real blocks of city where you have a lot of housing, where you have a lot of Gewerbe also, building business stuff. And in this context there will be a lot of investment. And I'm very curious how we can there guarantee that we also have this low price or low income housing that has to be available in the cities also. But we are trying now, like there are the Bebauungspläne, there are, somebody knows in English?
Sorry, no.
Okay, there are like big master plans for transformation areas where you say how you can build there. And in these master plans, we also try to introduce regulations to have housing for low-income people. So that's one way how we try with planning instruments to steer a little bit the investments of the public.
Is it actually so? I mean, as the head of the director of the SNBS, is sustainable housing always more expensive, or is that just a cliche?
It's difficult to say. It always depends to what you refer it to. And the point is, I would talk more about Minergie than SNBS. Obviously, you have to consent to investing a bit more to insulate your building better, to put solar panels, to provide with your renewable energy. But the whole point is that looking at a scale of 15, 20 years, that is only half the lifetime or the quarter of the lifetime of the building in Switzerland, you will get your money back easily. So we are really stuck in a kind of investment problem, and all the real estate developers try to compress their costs maximum to sell it afterwards to somebody else, and they don't. It's a bit cliche also, but they don't really care about what's going to happen when the building is exploited. I don't know if it's the correct word, but...
So that means we should be starting to think more long-term, and also, as I understand you beforehand, what you can do with the building when you're not using it maybe for this first purpose you built it.
Mm-hmm. And one...
think long-term.
Yeah, sorry. Just one very way to do it is just the laws, like the law project you have now in the canton of Vaud is very ambitious and goes very far regarding building requirements, and it's a very easy way to impose a sustainable living. And there, you just have to have a political volonté to do it, and to have your population that accepts these constraints in the end. But and it doesn't cost so much pour la société. It costs more to build in the beginning, but then you get your money back in the lifetime.
I think that's the key point, yeah. If sustainable construction were cheaper, we would see much more of that.
Of course.
I think it's very simple. We do see private investors do sustainable neighborhoods, you know, they providing some but they usually use a label. They emphasize like a marketing thing. Huh? They know they can charge higher rents because it is sustainable, because it has those qualities. There's a customership for that kind of dwelling. So, but it is more expensive. On the other hand, cooperatives build much more sustainable, and cooperatives don't have more money. So it can't be more expensive. So is it more expensive because because no private investor does sustainable? Or is it less expensive because cooperatives build sustainable? And I think that the answer is the horizon.
It's the long-term thinking.
It's the long-term thinking.
The cooperative will think maybe we
50, 60 years.
50
exactly.
years time, so it should be...
And they know it's expensive in the beginning, but in 20 years, 30 years, it's going to be perfectly affordable. If they are a bit older, they have maybe older buildings in their portfolio, and they accept not to get the maximum out of those old buildings, but yet a bit more than necessary. It's that kind of cross-subsidizes the newer buildings, buildings, the new apartments, and no private investor does that, or very few, because they want to earn as much money as possible on each of them and extract.
Here, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I'd love to add you to the discussion. If you have questions, just raise your hand. I would love to talk about materials and use and reuse a bit more with you, but if you have questions of any kind that concerns the three gentlemen, yes. Oh. I don't have to toss it, thank you.
Hello? Yeah. So it's a question for Philippe Thalmann. Everything we do needs energy and produce CO2. I mean, like just this conference, gaming, or anything. Why did you choose to reduce carbon by sharing spaces and weldings?
I'm not sure I understand the question. You're referring to our whole CO2 budget, not just housing. Why focus on housing? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I focus on housing because that's the topic of today, but of course the same applies to everything else. Also, transportation has to go down to zero. Industry has to go down by 90%. Agriculture, it's more complicated. There we count on negative emissions to compensate for the remaining emissions. So it's not just housing that has to reduce its emissions.
But
also.
housing is one of the big producers. It's about a third of the entire CO2 emissions from buildings,
It
right?
used to be like 35% in 1990, but since it improved much better than the other ones, it's now a smaller share. And if you add the biggest carbon footprint, the sector which is most important in Switzerland today,
Agriculture.
it's
the industry?
air travel.
What?
It's air travel, flying.
Oh.
It's even more than, the second one is mobility. It's trucks and cars and so forth. But air travel is even a bit worse for Swiss residents, people living in Switzerland. So it's just enormous, and it's not on the radar at all, curiously. Anyway, so housing is not the worst. I just talk about housing because that's the topic. Yeah.
But also, I mean, there are a lot of emissions
Sure.
also in construction itself, the grey emissions, the materials we use,
Exactly.
concrete is
Absolutely.
one of the big factors, right?
And that's where we save. The reducing the energy reference area or reducing new construction is not just a matter of having less area to heat, but it's also less building, and less building means less gray energy, gray CO2, material use, waste production. There's a lot of other environmental impacts associated to new construction. I hope there's no architects in the room, because it means for your job. My student, I used to teach project management in architecture. You didn't have my course in project management?
I did, yeah.
You did, huh? So one of the first things I showed them is that working on existing buildings is like 40% of overall activity. But for new architects, it's more like 80 or 90%, because the established architects reserve to themselves the fancy new construction. And the students who just get out of university, they start by working on the less attractive project, which is existing, transformation and so forth. And yet, at the time, nobody was doing that in the atelier, and there was no part of education was on working on existing buildings, just because it looks boring, isn't it? In the meanwhile, this has changed. There's lots of interesting things, and you showed some examples how you can transform industry buildings or even housing into new forms, augment them, and so forth. So it's becoming more attractive. But I think in the future, even more of architectural work will be on existing housing stock and not building museums and fancy luxurious villas and so forth.
Well, I mean, that's very interesting. And for me, that's also one part that makes me hope. If you realize how much change there was in architecture in the last 10 years, it's incredible.
Absolutely.
How the young people are now getting interested in refurbishment of buildings, in reuse of materials.
Students are pushing the professors.
But nevertheless, I think still, if we talk about sufficiency, the main problem is that we have to become much more flexible. We have to become, to have really an open mindset. It's like we are sitting here now, look at us. I mean, 500 people would have place here. We got lots of skylights, we got beamers. we could just go out and sit in the sun and have a little talk together. But we don't do that because we are not as flexible.
We wouldn't have minded 500 people, let me tell you.
Yeah. But I mean, if you talk about sufficiency, you have to be flexible and you have to be ready to re-question your situation all the time and to find a better situation to go with it.
So if we're talking about material use and reuse, like concrete is one of the big CO2 polluters, right? How much hope do you put into new materials? That's actually going to bring the CO2 footprint down?
Well, I can say maybe from our perspective. So last year we introduced now requirements regarding this embedded CO2 or this gray CO2 that we are going to every year tighten, so it becomes harder. For the moment, so the biggest change we are probably going to see is in reducing glassing, because that's very CO2 intensive, and using more wood in construction. And if you use concrete, ideally to use recycled concrete. But in the end, for the moment, except if we listen to Peter Richner's vision, he's one of the head of the EMPA, who is doing a lot of research on how you can capture carbon and stock it into concrete. It's going to take a few years till we get there, I think.
And the scalability, I would assume.
Yeah. And
that's not going to be a lot, right?
And we are really getting also in a conflict of interest, because mass in the building is what allows you to keep also a cool atmosphere in summer inside. So on the one hand, we are having global warming anyway, so we have to have more protection for summer overheating, so more mass in the building. On the other side, it has for consequence a lot more CO2 emissions. So for me at the moment, we are in a phase regarding this technical aspect where there is no more just one-sided solution, and you will have for every project to calculate what impact your decisions have and what consequence, on the one side CO2 and on the other side comfort, and find the best compromises in each case. That's, for me, the main evolution we are having now in a short scale.
Okay. More questions from the audience? Yes, Ginevra.
Hello. This is a question for whoever wants to reply, and I'm actually happy that we have academia, industry, and public sector. So hopefully, we can really think together. Philippe Thalmann mentioned that living together is a business model. That actually makes sense. From the discussion, this concept that thinking long-term is what we need arose, and also the marketing for convincing old people to live in an apartment better suited for their needs did not work. So I'm questioning how do we integrate these social projects into our economic system? What is it that we are lacking? Do we need some feedback, some thinking more collectively, not less individualism, or do we need to take each of us to take responsibility? Because at the end of the day, people working in the evil companies are still people with potentially the same societal goal as everyone else. And if they stopped 1 second thinking, okay, what's best for our society as a whole, maybe, I'm sure they will end up with the same conclusions that we're discussing today. So what is it that we're lacking? What is the ingredient that can make these social projects actually become real, become feasible?
What is it we're lacking, or maybe also what do we need? As I understand, the city of Basel has tried to work with people sort of in an integrative way, no?
Yeah, we are trying to do this, but I think one of the main things is we should in any case, we should stop saying those elderly people, they have to change. We also should say, stop saying the young people, they will have to do it. We have just to start each other at our place, and we have to be aware that living today in Switzerland, you're just producing a lot of CO2. You can't avoid it. It's not. It's just part of our lifestyle. So I think this is very important. And then also I think like the cooperatives, they have a possibility to really improve the situation for them. But it is always a little part of the society that lives in a cooperative. It's always those people that don't mind sharing music halls. They come together and play music. And you always get this part of the society that finds together in the cooperative, and that makes it possible to have other lifestyles, which is much harder if you have a public that's very diverse and very different needs.
Yeah, more thoughts on what's lacking or how we could move society or move people to go along?
Well, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't want to go into how changing people's mind or anything like that. But what I see of course the supply side. I see the investors, I see the owners of the buildings, and they have to move. Of course, they have the choice. Tenants don't. So it's they who propose. Nowadays, when there is housing shortage, what do? They build buildings where it's possible. Can be in Chavannes, next to the highway. It can be in Sierre, where there was 15% vacant housing at some point, just because it was possible to build there. So the idea is, we build houses and then we promote them, and people move to where we propose housing. So people have to adjust to the housing supply. Is that logical? Does that make sense? We seem to accept that. I think we should not accept that. That's not the way it should work. But I'm not saying that I immediately know how to improve it. Of course, there's an easy solution, which is more cooperatives, more non-profit property owners, because as long as it's for profit, if we just let for profit, we will have Airbnb throughout our beautiful cities. That's the most horrible thing that can happen. That's what would happen if we just let it for profit. So we need to, and nobody, I think, seriously believes that we can leave it entirely to the investor to decide what they build, how they rent, and so forth. There is strict regulation on construction, there's strict regulation on rents. The problem is that this rent regulation, this construction regulation, is currently designed for standard housing. If you own a building in Lausanne, which has all those 3-4 room apartments, and you want to transform it to my model, you cannot. You cannot, because we have rent regulation that says that after refurbishment, it sets a limit on what the rent can be after refurbishment, which is also what you have in Basel. But that doesn't work if the apartment disappears. If the apartment is just completely reorganized, how does rent regulation apply? So just an example of how complicated it is with the existing system, which is entirely focused on standard housing, and that doesn't have a future.
Does that also go for using office space? I mean, there's so many empty offices using those for housing. Is it also a problem of the regulation?
No, the regulation is to prevent cheap dwellings to disappear, which makes sense. We need cheap, affordable, not cheap, nothing is cheap in Switzerland. Affordable dwellings should not disappear. That's the basic of the regulation. But my proposal is that dwellings should disappear. So converting office into dwellings is no problem from that point of view, because there's no protection for preserving affordable offices, fortunately. No, there's other problems with that, but it's not this one.
No, I was just thinking along those lines, because if you say, well, we shouldn't go live somewhere out anywhere, but office buildings are in the cities, there are many buildings where they say, well, people are in a home office, we don't need this much office space, and it's empty.
Okay, there the problem is often that we also have regulation about sufficient housing of sufficient quality, such as the rooms must be a minimum size. There must be enough daylight, which is all makes sense because they were set up at a time when developers built tiny apartments with tiny rooms and tried to pack as many people into them as possible. No, and transforming office spaces has this problem that you have depth which are too big, so you cannot have
It doesn't
sufficient...
have enough light for it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which doesn't matter for offices, but it does matter for housing. So also that would have to be adjusted. Then there's need for flexibility to imagine ways of living and also to find a compromise. After all, of course, it would be great if everybody could have a larger, spacious, affordable apartment. It's just not compatible with neither with the size of the country, nor with the available resources, nor with the sustainability.
And one issue we tackle now, for example, in the building standards to make Mr. Thalmann's vision possible is maybe, let's say the people are not ready yet to do this transformation in a space that is more suitable for their needs. So what we try to do is just to impose that you have flexible, that it is easy to change the refurbishment of a home. So all the statical parts have to be built more on the outside so that it's more easy on the inside afterwards to move spaces and to adapt spaces in another way for smaller families or bigger families, just to make it flexible at least so that in 20 years we can still adapt to the needs we have then. That is one of the issues in sustainable building we have.
I mean, if I think about rent and how much it's gone up, if it were clear that whoever provides living space, that might be new, that might look different than what we're used to, but it's affordable, I mean, wouldn't that move the masses? Mm-hmm.
So you mean like a smaller space, or I didn't get it?
Yes.
The problem is, of course, we can imagine all sorts of fancy new buildings which propose these new modes of habitat, and that's what we see. That's some of the example I showed you, and many illustrative also showed some of these examples. But we do not want new construction. The solution should not be just adding more buildings. It should be transforming the existing ones, and that's much more challenging.
So it's transforming these existing ones, using the inside differently, and reuse buildings, like make new ones out of old ones, basically.
Exactly. They can also be increased. There's also addition. That's an example you showed also, where there's this addition put around an existing building. In smaller buildings, you can add floors. That's part of the transformation. But the important thing is, densification should not be adding more square meters, as it is usually understood. It should be about adding more people.
I mean, we are trying this now. First thing I want to say is this incentive tax we are introducing in Basel. That's going exactly in this direction. Because for new build, you will necessarily produce a lot of CO2. And if you have this incentive tax, it will become economically advantageous to refurbish another building. Maybe it would be more profitable to refurbish this old building than to tear it down and build it new. So that's one part that we are trying to work on, and where we are trying to give a new input. Yeah.
More questions from the audience at this moment? Yep.
So I had a question, but I wasn't sure if you had enough time for it.
How big is the question?
Okay, I'll just ask an easy one. Okay, so who are the main players in Geneva and Vaud in this field who could really be, maybe not already there, but trying to create a community around this so that to push forward the ideas that have been talked about today?
Well, I would say one of the ones I know the best, you mean like in coopérative, dans les logements coopératifs and these kinds of things?
So in my view, I think we need more co-creation, more involving the people into the idea, letting them think with us what should be the future and get them involved. And that's how you bring, their own ownership to the ideas,
Mm-hmm.
Not just throw on them ideas, but include them. But so who can actually convene and get people involved in thinking about how we should go forward in living sustainably, more efficiently, economically, even more socially, because when you live together with other people, you develop social skills, and when we live alone, we decrease our social skills. So actually, I think it's even better for society to live all together with the vision of Professor Thalmann. Personally, I do that. I have roommates. I've had roommates for the last 10 years, and now from all those 10 years of roommates, I have many friends. So I'll never be alone. I have so many friends, it's unreal. So I think it's good for the people to live together. But it's hard, at first it's hard to break the comfort of being alone and kind of, no, I open the window this way and I do this, pots and things this way. So you need to open your mind a little bit to other people.
And you need to negotiate, and
Yeah.
we all hate conflict, right?
You need to learn to communicate.
But just question maybe, are there main drivers? Who are the stakeholders that need to pull the wagon, basically?
I think what often works is just to show what is possible. So we're still at this stage where we need pioneers, examples. And there are examples. In Lausanne, it would be in the neighborhood of Métamorphose, in Blecheret. Particularly the Le Bled, I think it is the name, where the architect actually lives in the building. That's also interesting because he's one of the, and they try different, it's quite fancy what they propose. And the other one is Metamorphose. So it's Metamorph House, which is a proposal for single family houses, how they can be transformed in such a way that they host more than one family. So there are people who are developing models, and there is in Geneva, and there is in Zurich quite a few, and also in Basel, and so forth. So I think, yeah, just to show that it's possible, that it's not just a thing for leftist, hippie kind of people, that is also a business model, as a way to pay for quality construction and sustainable construction with this model. I think that's possibly what can, but it's very slow, unfortunately, too slow.
Slow?
Too slow, yeah. We have 25 years left. That's not much in construction.
Okay, first, thank you so much. It was really nice, some speeches and discussion. So Professor Philippe was showing at the beginning of his presentation, a nice graph with some downward trends for CO2 emissions and energy consumption. And one of the things that he pointed out was the lack of labor force regarding and related to migration. That would be one of the, let's say, constraints to achieve, for achieving like these nice numbers by 2050. So could you please point out maybe one or two other constraints that from your point of view are like essential for achieving these nice numbers by 2050 from the academy, from the policy point of view, from the private sector?
So what are the constraints that make us not go further down in those that emission scale?
Well, one thing is the owners. You know that roughly half of the rental apartments belong to individuals. The other half belongs to institutional owners, pension funds, and companies, and so forth. But about one half still belongs to individual people. And I suspect that much of the refurbishment was done by those who have the technical and financial capabilities. And for lots of people who still own one building, or they inherited it maybe, or it's even still owned by the community of inheritors, for them it's much, much more difficult. Then there is 1 million single-family houses. New single-family houses, they are good. They are Minergie, A, P, whatever you want. They have heat pumps and so forth. They're good. But that's the new ones. There's 1 million are not new, and many of them, this is not professional owners. So for them, it's very challenging. That's just one of the barriers I want to raise.
I'm looking at the clock. We started a bit late, that's why we're doing a bit longer, but I do have one question for each of the three of you to finish up. And I would like to start with you, Philippe Noger. You're a specialist on biodiversity. We've talked about social integration and facts and figures and economics, but biodiversity, when you densify a city, where does it, I mean, you're a specialist on that. The canton of Basel-Stadt, how do you do it? How do you envision that those bumblebees, are still around, even if it's a bit warmer, maybe? Should we all have a rooftop garden? Or what is the thinking of Basel-Stadt on biodiversity and urbanization.
Well, that's yet another topic, eh? We didn't prepare that. But I had 2 or 3 slides that would have shown you some more in this direction. In any case, I think we have to do something about biodiversity also. But most important is that people like to live where they are. And that's a connection, again, to the sufficiency discussion. Okay? If we live in a place where we can stay outside and where we can have a nice living, where we get attached to the block where we live, that's also a very important part of our life, and that makes it maybe possible also to live in a smaller apartment if I have the whole environment that stays the same. That's very important. So I think we have to have a good Aufenthaltsquality for staying in the outdoors. We have to be much more aware how we design public spaces, how we introduce stuff for biodiversity, but also for us as people. You have to find places where you can stay outside, where you can meet other people, where you can get in touch, and that makes basically the quality of a city.
But can you give like one or 2 examples, like big trees, for
Big
instance?
trees is a very good thing, yeah. If you plant big trees, it's good for humans. I mean, in history, people come together at big trees. It's good for animals. There are hundreds of animals living on one big tree, and it's good for city planning because it is a part of the city that gives character to a block. So that's one of the easiest things you can do. It
is a part of your strategy, right, in Basel?
Yes, we are, for our own project, we try to introduce in every project one big tree. And we think that this is one thing that helps many aspects of pop.
And cooling, of course, for the heat island effect.
Yes, exactly.
So, and for Olivier and Philippe Thalmann, the question, if you were asked what is the vision, how are we going to live in 50 years? What would an apartment or a surrounding look like ideally?
I would add on to Philippe. For me, the vision would be like to bringing all the advantages people look for in single house buildings, in buildings where you live together. Trees is a part of it. Another important issue, I think, is sound insulation, not hearing your neighbors going up and down or whatever. Having light, having a view. Having also privacy, and bringing all these qualities in a building where you live with other people. So you have at the same time the privacy, and you have at the same time all the positive aspects of living together and being able to share stuff and being more efficient in that regard.
Yeah, if you think of, if you're allowed to think in terms of utopia, Ukronia even,
yes.
Then it would be a kind of a neighborhood where everybody knows everyone, where doors stay open, where kids run from one place to the other, where there is sufficient, ample, agreeable outside space so that you don't mind just having 12 square meters where you go back at night to sleep. So that would be... there's one thing I wanted to add because I didn't have time. The vote in November on against the extension of highways. First time that population votes against more highways, more roads. And the reason was they didn't believe that more highways would solve the problem. I'm dreaming of a vote against extension of construction areas because adding more houses, more dwellings will not solve the housing shortage problem. Just as more highways don't solve the congestion problem. Okay, that was just a final little comment.
So you know where to start the initiative.
I'm signing.
What does Basel look like in 50 years?
Where are we going to be in 50 years?
What does Basel look like in 50 years' time?
Ideally.
Well, I think we will
Ideally, yes.
we will reach net zero, for sure, thanks to the transformation areas. But on the other hand, I mean, I had once a graph, it was like China, they used in 2 years as much concrete as the United States in the last century. And that's going to go on. So I think we can solve this problem in Switzerland We will find new materials, we will organize ourselves in a different way, we will bring down the calculation, but to have the solution on the global scale, it's going to be another question.
So that's sort of the outlook towards internationality. Thank you so much for discussing with us, Philippe Thalmann, Philippe Noger, and Olivier Meile. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was the panel on housing. There's going to be a masterclass starting, I'd say in 15 minutes. We start a little bit late, 5 minutes late. 10? 20 minutes? Say it. 10 minutes. Okay. All right, we start on time at 11:30 back here for the masterclass with Amy Player. It's going to be on storytelling. How do you tell people, you know, the things so they're motivated and not demotivated? Thank you so much and see you just now. Thank you too.